Okay, let us complete this discussion here. So, in this late diastole phase, which is heart cycle 1, the tricuspid valve 5 and mitral valve 6 remains open, and the pulmonary valve and aortic valve, that is 7 and 8, remains closed. So, this will ensure that there is no backward flow of blood from pulmonary artery to the ventricle or from aorta into the ventricle, and this will, and when the valve 5 and 6 remains open, that is tricuspid and mitral valves remain open, blood will flow easily from atrium to the ventricle, from left atrium to left ventricle, from right atrium to right ventricle. And remember, the left ventricle will have oxygenated blood, that is 4 will have oxygenated blood, and right ventricle, that is 3, will have deoxygenated blood. Now let us go to see the cycle number 2, heart cycle 2. Heart cycle 2 is called atrial systole. Remember, systole means rise in pressure or contraction, and diastole means relaxation. Okay. Now in the heart cycle 2, the right and left atrium, that is 1 and 2, contract. Okay, so I have shown the arrow that it is contracting now, and that will pump the blood into the right and left ventricle. Right ventricle is 3, left ventricle is 4. Now in this phase, since the blood has to flow from atrium to ventricle, the tricuspid and mitral valves remain wide open to facilitate blood flow. And at the end of this systolic atrial systole, that is atrial contraction, the right and left ventricle will be full of blood. Now right ventricle, that is 3, will become full, will be full with deoxygenated blood, and left ventricle, that is 4, will be full with oxygenated blood. So let us talk a little bit about the status of the valve. The tricuspid valve 5 and mitral valve 6 will remain open. Pulmonary valve 7 and aortic valve 8 will remain shut. So aortic and pulmonary valve remains closed, and that will prevent any backward flow of blood from pulmonary artery to the ventricle and from aorta into the ventricle. So remember this, the status of the valve is also very important. When I showed that 7 and 8 valve closed, I purposely draw with a black thing that shows that these valves are remain closed. And remember, when the valve remains open, that facilitates blood flow. When the valves remains closed, that prevents backward flow of blood. All these valves will only ensure that blood flows in one direction only, just like heart pump, bicycle pump. Okay, any pump, the valve only ensure that there is a flow only in one direction. If things flow in both directions, a pump will completely fail. Now let us go to heart cycle 3. Now in this cycle, the left ventricle contract. Now it is the turn of the ventricle. Earlier we have seen atrium, it was relaxing, then it was contracting. Now the left ventricle contract, and that will eject oxygenated blood into aorta, that is from the chamber 2. Okay, left ventricle is 2, so that will eject oxygenated blood into aorta. Aorta I have marked with 3, and it will eject deoxygenated blood into pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery I marked with 4, and I have shown the flow of blood with red arrow. Okay. Now in this step, that is in ventricular systole, the tricuspid valve 5 and mitral valve 6 will remain shut. So this will prevent any flow of blood from ventricle to atrium. So that means blood will not flow from ventricle to atrium. Blood will flow only from ventricle to artery. Okay. So tricuspid and mitral valve remains shut, Okay. Now pulmonary and aortic valve opens. Pulmonary and aortic valve will open, that is 3 and 4. This will ensure the blood flows from ventricle to artery, that is from left ventricle to aorta and right ventricle to pulmonary artery. Deoxygenated blood in the pulmonary artery flows to lungs, and oxygenated blood in the aorta flows to all the body organs. So remember one more thing, aortic and pulmonary valves are also called semilunar valves. So that is another term. So if they ask what is semilunar valve, you can say aortic and pulmonary valves are also called semilunar valves. Similarly, tricuspid and mitral valves are also called atrioventricular valves because they are at the junction of atrium and ventricle. So there are two more new terms. One is semilunar valve and atrioventricular valve. So now we discussed two words, systole and diastole, but I don't think we have explained much in detail. So remember, systole means contraction and diastole means relaxation. So these two terms you should remember. Okay. Maybe I will write it somewhere. What is systole and diastole? Okay, and now let us talk about heart cycle 4. That is the last phase. That is called early diastole. So now ventricular contraction is also over. Now it is the term for ventricular relaxation, which is called early diastole or relaxation. Diastole means relaxation. So the ventricle relaxes and ventricular diastole commences. Okay. I will discuss this in the next tutorial, but let us explain the terms diastole and systole because I think I did not write anywhere or did not explain much in detail. So remember, diastole means release of pressure or relaxation. That is the physiological term for relaxation. Similarly, systole means increase in pressure or contraction, rise of pressure or contraction. So that is called systole. So in the next tutorial, I will complete this discussion about heartbeat.